What's the real reason you're hesitating to leave your corporate job to start your own business? Most women might say it's because of the money or the timing, but research shows something very different. It's actually the identity crisis that comes from losing the corporate title. That's today's topic. Let's dive in. Welcome to Break Up with Corporate, the podcast for women who want to plan their escape from the 9 to 5 and build a business of their very own. I'm your host, Debbie Mitten, a business mentor at Virtually Debbie, and a recovering corporate survivor after spending 37 years inside the matrix. All right, welcome back, everyone. I was really surprised to see the research that shows more women are concerned about the identity crisis that comes with making the transition from employee to entrepreneur. Losing the identity is scarier to them than the financial concern. So let's take a closer look at why this might be happening and if an identity crisis is what is really holding you back from planning your exit. Let's start with familiarity and safety. When you have a corporate career as long as mine, you know the landscape like the back of your hand. You're probably at the top of your game and very familiar with all the office politics. You know who all the players are and how to navigate through all the corporate BS. You can practically do this in your sleep, and that feels familiar and safe, even in an environment that is toxic. But at the end of the day, the toxic corporate structure is draining your life force. But you ignore that, because leaving that certainty would make you look more closely at who you would have to become outside that corporate environment. And a lot of us don't want to face that, or even know where to begin if we even wanted to build something of our own. I didn't want to face that for years, until I burned out and was ultimately laid off and had no choice but to face that, to face who I would become without that corporate title. Staying in something familiar protects you from the scary unknown. When you transition from employee to entrepreneur, there's a feeling of being exposed by building something in real time and so publicly. You're announcing to the world that this is who you are now as a new entrepreneur. Corporate kept you structured. You spent years climbing a ladder where someone else defined who you are, what you do, and how much you could make. There were these predictable annual reviews, promotions. There were clearly defined job descriptions and a regular schedule that was made for you. Walking away from something that predictable can be terrifying. And as a new entrepreneur, you have to fill your own calendar. And also, there's a bit of a hit to your ego when you leave a steady job that has a prestigious title attached to it. Maybe you had some level of authority that you were accustomed to, which is exactly why the thought of starting over as a newbie can be such a massive blow to your pride. You were the expert in your field, and now, at the prospect of becoming a new entrepreneur, you are all the things. You're CEO, CMO, CFO, and there's a risk of looking clueless in some of the areas while you're building something in public. And then once you're on your own, it gets awfully quiet, except for that annoying voice in your head. You used to have back-to-back meetings, juggling several projects, and interacting with dozens of colleagues. But as an entrepreneur, it suddenly gets very lonely in the beginning until you learn the value of finding a community as you build. Now, research on high-achieving career transitions points out this exact culture shock, losing that built-in institutional framework. It leaves a massive hole right where your daily sense of importance used to be. That validation is suddenly gone. And as a new entrepreneur, you are responsible for that. I lived this transition, but it looked a little different for me. You see, I didn't have the choice to plan an exit. I got laid off, so I had to figure everything out pretty quickly. One day I had the title, the structured schedule, and the identity, and then I didn't. I was suddenly a business owner overnight. Sure, getting that LLC was easy, but deconditioning from the corporate mindset, not so much. The first thing I had to do was change the way I spoke in my marketing. I caught myself using corporate jargon, and it just wasn't connecting with people. I was also now in charge of my own calendar, and it wasn't going to fill itself up. I had to find a whole new community of people, and they had no clue who I was, and they certainly didn't care about my old title. This self-proclaimed introvert had to go out into the world and find my people. I was now the little fish swimming in a big ocean, and I did not like how that felt. Imposter syndrome kicked in, and my confidence was shot. All this happened while simultaneously healing from corporate burnout. But you're still employed, and you're listening to this podcast, and I want to make sure that you're not putting off leaving a bad situation for all the wrong reasons. Admitting to yourself that facing a post-corporate identity crisis feels vulnerable. Your brain steps in to protect you by finding all the reasons why you'd be crazy to leave your job. So you might convince yourself that delaying this decision is logical. You tell yourself you just need a few more months of savings as a buffer, even though your bank account is actually fine. You tell yourself to wait for the market to improve or the economy to settle down. But you know deep down inside, these are just excuses. And research shows that when an identity crisis feels too much to face, the underlying fear disguises itself as you're being just practical. So while you're at this draining job, the ideas you had to start your own business take a back seat. You tuck them away, and you hope the sound of your intuitive voice telling you to get the heck out of there just quiets down. That voice is very inconvenient for you right now, but you know you should leave. You know you want to start something of your own, but you're caught up in this weird cycle. So how do you break out of that cycle? Well, one is you give yourself time to unwind from all the corporate conditioning. When women first leave, they often make this classic mistake. They build a small, stressful version of where they become both the overworked employee and the demanding boss. They recreate the same exact burnout culture in their new business. And you've got to be careful. You've got to catch yourself when you do this. It's going to take a hot minute to decondition from everything you learned in corporate to find out who you are underneath. So be patient with yourself. And two, most women don't know how to untangle their self-worth from their corporate title. If you want to face that fear head on, you have to empower yourself. The part that keeps most women stuck is figuring out who they are and how to translate their expertise, skills, talents, and gifts into a business that people will pay them for. And the good news is that you're not starting from scratch. You are not a newbie. You just have temporary amnesia. You forgot what a badass you really are. So I'm going to help jog your memory a little bit. You have to separate your capabilities from the corporation. So how do you do that? Think about what you actually did every day. Just break it down. Everything you did in that corporate job has a transferable skill over to your new venture. You just don't realize it yet because you're kind of caught up in the eye of the storm. You need to zoom out. You need to get an objective view of all the things that you're capable of and understand how they benefit you as a new entrepreneur. You worked in fast-paced environments and probably juggled a million things at once. You navigated toxic office politics, solved problems, managed difficult people, stayed on budget, kept a team moving forward under immense pressure. And that is the exact kind of grit you bring to entrepreneurship. Your brain still knows how to handle chaos, and how to make high pressure decisions. And those qualities will all come in handy. The main challenge of this entire transition is learning how to take those real, hard-earned skills and confidently translate them into your own new world. And that means stripping things down to the bare bones. Strip away the corporate jargon and look at the actual problems you solved for people every single day. It means figuring out how to charge for your expertise instead of trading away for a biweekly paycheck and an annual performance review that never really reflected your worth at all. And if you realize that your true hesitation to leave isn't really about the money, but about surviving the identity crisis, let's talk. I would suggest booking a corporate leap assessment. It's designed for any woman in corporate who knows that she wants out and needs to find out if she's actually ready to go. I'm not just talking financially, but I'm talking mentally, emotionally, all the things. Let's take that emotional weight of the identity crisis off your shoulders and look at your actual experience and turn it into a plan to get you the heck out of there. It's time to stop hiding and start building something that you can call your own. Well, that's this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining. I'll be back next week with another episode. Take good care of yourselves.